Welcome to the We Are Wake Tech podcast with your host, Wake Tech President, Dr. Scott Ralls.
Hello, and welcome to the We Are Wake Tech podcast. I'm Scott Ralls, your host and president of Wake Tech, and today I'm playing another role, might say a little bit of fanboy today, because if you know me, and people who know me, I'm kind of an avid reader. I love reading, I love my books, and I have read just recently one of my favorite books called Between Two Trailers, which just happens to be written by a Wake Tech faculty member, Trent, Dana, who is just a phenomenally popular and great, wonderful Wake Tech faculty. We have so many talented Wake Tech faculty, and you are certainly among that great group. Thank you for spending time with us today, and congratulations. You must be so proud.
Oh, I am, and thank you so much for having me, Dr. Ralls. You know, like this book is a gift to myself, but it's really at its heart about community, and Wake Tech community has been so influential on my sharing my story. So
well,
thank you.
You helped make this place a great community. Let me share a little bit about this book so that people don't think I'm just saying this just because Dana happens to be a Wake Tech. But I checked out last week Amazon. I pay attention to the best books list because I try to choose what I'm going to read at different times. So I thought I'd check out Dana's book. And her book right now on the best book of the year list is listed in the biography memoirs as one of the best books of 2024. And we're getting towards the end of October, so that's pretty good when it gets towards the end of October. So one of the best books of the year for 2024. Here's what, you can see all the incredible reviews of the book. Here's something that was said on that particular Amazon page, which I thought captured it. A powerful, unforgettable memoir about a girl who escapes her childhood as a preschool drug dealer in rural Indiana. That's a story. You'll hear a little more about that story, only to find out that no one can really make it out until they make peace with where their story begins. Home. It's a story about home. Yeah. It's a story about coping. Dana just gave a presentation, which was truly, really, it was kind of a master class is what it was. It was a master class in coping, and we had 125 students here, I think, and faculty and others who were just, and you talked a little bit about the book, but you really talked to them about how to cope with challenges and difficulties. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but let's talk a little bit about you and maybe through your story, because it is so vivid in this book. So maybe through the characters. Let's start with the king.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the king?
So the king was my father. He was a diagnosed schizophrenic, but he was also a recreational therapist. And so he had gone to school, master's level degree student, to learn how to play. You know, he was paid to play. And what he did for various psych hospitals was he would work with patients and help them cope with their trauma by moving their bodies and playing games. And so I learned at a young age from him that one of the ways that we can cope is by having fun, right, and enjoying ourselves. But that was the good side of King.
Right.
And the harder side of King was that he was schizophrenic, and most of the time he was unmedicated, which led to a series of choices, like becoming a drug trafficker in Western Indiana. And so during my early childhood, King ran a kiddie ride amusement business where we shuffled drugs in and out of counties, state lines, across the U.S. through these kiddie ride carcasses. And at 4 years old, when I was expelled from preschool for misbehaving, right, as all 4-year-olds do, and I came home, my father, who was unmedicated at the time, said, "Well, kid, I guess you're not going to be good at school." So he handed me a razor blade and a knife, and he taught me how to cut drugs and traffic with him. At 4 years old. And I became his preschool lookout, and he gave me a street name. He called me Budgie. And so even though he was a very talented man, very smart, he had a side to him where he did not make great decisions. And so my childhood was about running this carnival life with him, being his lookout on drug drops and in trafficking business. And it was traumatic, right? It was fun. As a kid, I thought it was a giant carnival, right?
Adventurous,
adventurous, right? Like a giant state fair everywhere we went. But I know long term, it wasn't good for my brain and my body. And so part of what we did today, talking with the students, is how do you cope when coping is hard? And what are the things that have shaped you? Home. How has home shaped you? who are the people and places that have shaped you in your life, and how does that impact you now in ways that you're aware of and in ways you aren't aware of. And so the book is really about story and memoir, but it's also learning how to cope with this very early childhood event.
Which, impacts so many people. And I think all of us can look back at our childhood and see some aspects that shape positively and negatively who we are today. But for kids who really deal with traumatic childhoods, it's so challenging.
It is. There's acute trauma and chronic trauma, right? One event, single event, or repeated events. And 64% of Americans, that's over half of the American population, have one adverse childhood experience. The most common one is divorce, right? Many of our students have experienced divorce in their home. And so they've also experienced abuse and neglect, but household dysfunction is one of those acute and chronic traumas. And so for them, thinking about their own story and the way in which it has shaped how they adapt and how they cope or don't cope, healthy, unhealthy ways here at college when this is a stressful environment. And so I'm really grateful that Wake Tech is giving them opportunities to put more tools in their toolbox.
This book, it's a biography, but it reads like a novel, and I think it's because the characters are so rich. I mean, while your parents faced their mental health challenges, boy, they were some characters, it seemed like. And the lady, your mother, talk a little bit about the lady.
Yeah. So while the king was sort of wild, right, and sort of ran this gang of men who were his disciples and worked for him in the trafficking business, the lady was this very polite Southern North Carolinian debutante woman who had gorgeous porcelain skin and won beauty pageants all her young life. But she had a hard time coping as well. She was diagnosed with personality disorders, and she was inpatient for a long time during her adolescence, inpatient hospitalization, and she had suicide attempts. And so it was this idea that even though she was externally looked like she was put together and she could compose herself in a room and she was well poised, inside she was a bit of a mess. And so between the two of them, life was really combustible, right? They actually met in an inpatient hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio, where they were both working, but it was a locked inpatient ward. And once their patients found out that they were dating, the two of them, the king and the lady, their patients, who were very ill at the time, even said, "This is a terrible idea. This is a match that's going to end in madness." And they were larger than life characters who had huge personalities. And it was sort of my job as a kid to sort of stay out of the way and help where I could.
Well, as a biography, you're the central character in this. And that character, starting out young, is Budgie. I mean, we see each other in the parking lot occasionally as we're crossing, going to the YMCA. And so as I've been reading the book, sometimes when you've said hello, I've wanted to say, "Hey, Budgie." But
I would love that. I would welcome that.
But thinking about the stages of your life, as they kind of come out in this book, can you talk a little bit about the Budgie stage and Budgie and growing up? Well, just tell us about Budgie.
So Budgie is, I didn't know this until I was 36, but a budgie is a bird. It's a little parakeet trained to mirror its owner, right? To take the shape of whatever its owner wants and to mimic the words verbatim. And so that's what I did as a kid. I was my father's budgie. I was his preschool lookout, but I also led the life of mirroring whatever behavior he was showing me. And for him, that was street fighting, knife fighting, that was explosions, that was teaching me how to defend myself in dangerous situations. And there were many as a kid. We were not in safe places. We were moving huge amounts of drugs. We had always had tons of cash on us. We had weapons on us at all times. He had a grand jury indictment for trafficking at one time. I mean, it was a dangerous job. And so that time period of my life was dangerous. And the challenge with that, right, is that even though it was a few short years of really intense danger, is that it stayed with me in my body. So in many ways, I have remained that cute little parakeet girl who mirrors and mimics her owner, but is also ready to explode at any time. Because my father's favorite thing to say was, no one expects a runt in a Looney Tunes shirt to shank you, right? No one expects a kid.
Yeah, that's true. Nobody expects that. Yeah.
Right? And so now that I'm a teacher and adult, I've done so much work to untangle the mess of all of those early years to get to where I am right here, right now at Wake Tech.
You know, in reading about those early years, the budgie years, it felt to me, as a child, you were always seeking out the opportunity to be a child, which was not, as it would be for probably the majority of children, as common. You were having to find those opportunities, and that's probably, you know, some of the real challenge for you was being a 4-year-old, and we don't expect 4-year-olds to do anything, much less be a lookout for drug deals.
Right.
But you were struggling to find the times when you could be a 4-year-old during that time.
Yes. Even though I was raised by the king who was the king of all play.
Yeah.
You know, I myself
and definitely loved you.
Oh,
I mean, you did have,
absolutely.
it seemed like, unconditional love, just very traumatic situation.
Exactly. And that is a huge difference, right? When children are loved, they can emerge from situations with a different set of tools than children who don't experience any amount of unconditional love. But you're right, my challenge was playing. You know, the games that I played as a 4-year-old in that trailer in Western Indiana, the game I played was teacher. Right? I would take our stacks of National Geographics, because my mother loved to read, and I would pass them out on the dirty floor of the trailer, and I would give my students homework from their textbooks, right? So even my play was sort of an adult figure helping out other imaginary students.
And as you grew up, fortunate for us in North Carolina, but you made your way to North Carolina with the lady, because this was her home. Person County, I think it was.
Rockingham.
Rockingham,
Yes,
right?
you're right.
Rockingham, not Person County, so it was Rockingham.
Yeah.
And so made it to North Carolina. And then that was kind of an evolutionary period for you through middle school and high school. But then as you matured, you were dealing with some of those childhood challenges. And you talked about that today with the students, about ACEs and childhood experiences and the impact. And that led to challenges for you that you had to overcome as you went through all the way into graduate school, Duke Divinity School, and past that.
Huge challenges, because all of that stays with us. We know that the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Events study, from Kaiser Permanente in the 90s, shows that early formation is so important on our brains and our central nervous system. And so when we left Indiana for North Carolina, that was an abrupt move. I never said goodbye to my room or my toys. It was just abrupt. We were done. And in North Carolina, that was very much my mother's world. We were coming from my father's world, which was gritty and dirty and tough, and people are mean. And then my mother's world was everyone's polite and Southern, and you sort of have your externals in order. And so I quickly learned how to adapt to that culture and how to adapt to this world.
Huge contrast.
Huge contrast.
Yeah.
So I became budgie over here for my mother, and she called me Revy, R-E-V-Y, which was short for Reverend, because what she wanted was her polite, very spiritual, very religious daughter, and my father wanted his heir to his kingdom, right? And so in North Carolina, I learned different ways to cope, some healthy, some unhealthy. And you're right, Dr. Ralls, those completely stayed with me, and we talked about some of them today. Things like substance misuse and addiction. So my addiction is food, right? So because I was food insecure as a kiddo and would only have usually ketchup sandwiches to eat and Hawaiian punch, no real nutrients, because we didn't have a grocery store, and my parents they didn't cook, right? Or buy fresh food. And so it's kind of like whack-a-mole, right? Then when you have food, it becomes a symbol, right? And so then the addiction fuels your need to I may not get another meal. Oh my gosh, I've got to eat, because you've got to store your food, because your brain remembers those earliest years. And so what I've had to do my whole life is to find new ways of coping and new tools. And that's so much of what we talked about today. You know, what I hope I'm doing for the students is just saving them a little time right? And shrinking the amount of time so that they have something go to, that they don't have to spend 2 decades learning the way I've had to spend 2 decades learning.
Yeah, talking about that a little bit, because you, something I always feel like is that our greatest strengths also lead to our greatest weaknesses.
Always.
Or sometimes our challenges also lead us to, they create challenges for us in ways, but they also lead to our strengths.
Right.
And just listening to you and watching you teach the way you do, I would say you are an expert. I said you taught a master class in coping and dealing with, challenges with whatever they may be, mental health challenges or any types of challenges. But you had to become a coping expert at 4 years of age, and you talked about that, changing of environments. For me, I moved every 4 years. My dad was a Methodist minister. I have Duke Divinity School. I had a brother in Duke Divinity, but we moved all the time, and so that created things that I can see about myself that maybe not as positive, but it also led to coping skills. And you seem like you have many expertise, but you're an expert in coping.
Thank you. I don't feel like I am sometimes, right? Because it takes so much practice. But certainly this spiritual side of things does help. Having the seminary education at Duke Divinity School, being ordained as a minister, I definitely see the tie-ins, and being a natural helper. I mean, that's a helping profession. Going to Div School, Duke Div is training helpers, right?
And you can kind of reflect on,
Exactly.
It gives you the opportunity to look back in that kind of environment, but reflect on a past where you had to cope.
That's right.
More than almost any other 4-year-old or 8-year-old are moving along.
That's right. And so now, how do you sit in the hole with others when they're learning how to cope, right? Because at the end of the day, that's really what it was for me. It was teachers, it was classmates, it was extended family members, it was my sibling, folks who were willing to sit with me in my hardest times when I had unhealthy coping, who understood my story better than I did, because I wasn't at a place where I was looking back, right? I was so young, that helped me through until I could be in a safe place to look back and write between 2 trailers.
And I think probably maybe some of our students would identify as a young adult, those challenges became manifest in some of your life.
Yes, absolutely. Mental health challenges, anxiety, depression, addiction when it comes to food, not doing well in school, doing a lot better than I was capable of doing better, but just so overwhelmed, right? Overwhelmed. But those challenges, all of those challenges make a soup, right? Where we have to learn, we have to adapt in so many ways. And so then you're learning how to do the practice, which is reaching for healthier coping, and then just trying it over and over and over, and being willing to fail. There's a lot of failure. And that's, I hope, what we're passing on to our students, right? Is that it's okay to fail. This is about practice. And we're doing this in community. You are safe and you are connected here. This is your laboratory to try things and to see what works for you, so you can flip your challenges into successes.
One of the things with our community college students, while many of them have had more challenges than other college students, sometimes I think those challenges create advantages for them, because there's a lot of grit and resilience in community college students and obviously you're someone of, and you don't just learn that, you have to experience that. And so sometimes I think our students may not realize just how strong they are because of their ability to, even though they're facing challenges, still how they've learned to cope and address challenges that many others have not yet at their age.
That's exactly right. It's their superpower.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't see it. And so it's our job to help name it for them, and show them, and to show them that they can continue to reach for that and leverage that their entire lives. That grit never goes away. That resilience never goes away. Just like the trauma is embedded in our brains and bodies, what they learn to adapt, that is also embedded in their bodies and in their experiences. And so they can pay it forward in perpetuity, helping others and also helping their own families, helping themselves, Whereas traditionally, if you look back, under-resourced population, right? Kiddos that need a lot of support, and they're turning their challenges, like you said, into grit and resilience.
Well, they have a capability. Sometimes it may be hard for them to see that because they have so much challenge, but they do have unique capability. They also have a unique appreciation for things. That's the thing I loved watching these students today with you, was how much they could appreciate you and your experience, but also what you were helping them with.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So moving forward in the book, there was this evolutionary part. So you go through, there's Budgie, the 4-year-old drug dealer, and then moving to North Carolina and the challenge of the contrast there, and then moving through, young adulthood, early adulthood. But then when your parents passed away, and there was a time of reflection for you. And the thing that struck me is you saw also, you talked about this a little bit today, is the power of home.
Yes.
The power of connectivity, the power of community. I think sometimes that's our superpower here at Wake Tech.
It is.
And I was wondering if I might ask a favor. The last part of the book, would you read the last part?
Love to.
So when so to me, reading this right here when it starts where it says, "Just as it's true that a preschooler's hands," and then talking about home. Would you read that passage? Because I think, to me, that really was the culmination point.
Thank you, Dr. Ralls. Yes. Okay. Just as it's true that a preschooler's hands are the perfect size for razor blades, it's also true that helping my schizophrenic drug-lord father chop, drop, and traffic kilos in kiddie ride carcasses across flyover country was the best thing that's ever happened to me. I realize now that the danger of my drug trafficking childhood wasn't the weapons or the fight training or the drug business. It wasn't King's schizophrenic psychosis or the lady's personality disorders. The real danger was denying what happened between two trailers. The real danger was in not accepting my parents for who they were, mental illness and addiction and poverty and all. The real danger was in not realizing that they were doing the very best they could with what they had. The real danger was in hiding it all. Maybe King was right. You can't fix crazy. Or better yet, maybe you don't need to. Because trying to means that you spend your entire life thinking you are adrift, which leaves you secretive, ashamed, isolated, confused, wandering, and lonely, as Budgie or Revy, depending on the day, when in fact you are really both. Home, it turns out, was there all along in my two very loving and very unconventional yet faithful parents who believed in miracles. I am their miracle. I am their legacy. They are my home. Home, it turns out, is where the war is. It's also where the healing begins.
That's great. To me, I mentioned I love reading, and so sometimes you read a book and you get. The start of this book is amazing because the story of Budgie, but just the way you brought it all together there at the end, you really did bring it together. And right before that last page, that ending, was your return back to, is it pronounced Vermilion County?
Vermilion
County,
yes.
and Dana, Indiana, and watching you today, you taught our students coping skills, talking about breathing, taking deep breaths. I almost felt like when you went back to Dana after your parents had passed away, spending time with your cousins and your family and experiencing Dana again with those eyes, looking in reflection, it was almost like you were exhaling in a way around your life of an acceptance and appreciation that maybe had been tough for you earlier. I don't know.
I love that. I had not put that together, and I love that. And it's true. It really was. I sort of held in all of this story, the secrets, the anxiety, the shame of it. And you're right. I was going home to accept it, right? And to share it, and to share the lessons from it. So in many ways, you're right. That is a big sigh of relief, to be open with it and to share it in hopes that other people will also see themselves in the story.
It seemed like you may have seen a beauty in Dana that it was tough to experience when you were younger.
Right.
I think you saw it and you appreciate it, but reflecting back, you had that exhale of appreciation for
Absolutely. Yeah. It's an exhale of safety, too. Of safety, and know that you can make it through. You do have the grit. You do have the resilience.
You did it.
You did it with a lot of help, a lot of help. But, returning home to the people and places that have shaped us is the secret, even if we only do it metaphorically, even if we only come home to ourselves, right? But having that touch point of knowing who we are and how that has impacted our identities, right, helps us cope long term. And it does help us see how resilient we are.
And see the beauty in some of the things that we saw as challenging or things growing up that we may have felt shame about, but as we look at it in another light, it shaped who we are. And you have such a beauty as a teacher that we're very fortunate that you're here. I wanted to share one last thing. There was one of the pages, there was a prediction by the king.
Oh, yes.
I think I can remember it instead of finding the page. And I think the king predicted that you were going to have 3 boys.
Yes. Yep.
He even said the names. I think it was Joshua, James, and Joseph.
You got it,
I remember. And he said, you were going to be a rock star. No, he said, how did he say it? It was like you were going to be a rock, he didn't use rock star, but it was something like rock star professor at Indiana State University.
Yes, yes.
Well, the boys, not yet.
Right, not yet.
Indiana State, nah.
Right.
But you are a rock star at Wake Tech, and you're a rock star in this community, in this county. We're so fortunate that you're here, and we're so proud of you. Look at you.
Thank you.
A best-selling author and a Wake Tech instructor, faculty member, professor. Expect the unexpected at Wake Tech.
Amen.
Expect the unexpected at Wake Tech, and read this book. You will love it. Expect the unexpected. Dana, Trent, thank you so much for joining me today on this special edition of the We Are Wake Tech podcast.
It's my honor. Thank you so much, Dr. Ralls.
Thank you. And to all of you, our viewers and our listeners today, thank you for tuning in to the We Are Wake Tech podcast. You can find our podcast wherever you look for podcasts, Spotify, Apple. They're there. Look for We Are Wake Tech. Pull it up, rate it, and be sure to tune in next time on the We Are Wake Tech podcast.
I'm Joshua McKinney with your Wake Tech News Update. Wake Tech is pleased to announce the addition of the University of North Carolina at Pembroke's guaranteed admission program for its university transfer options. The Brave Nation Advantage program guarantees admissions to UNC Pembroke for Wake Tech graduates who want to progress and complete a bachelor's degree. Wake Tech and UNC Pembroke officials celebrated the new partnership at a signing ceremony on the Southern Wake campus. To learn more, visit transfer.waketech.edu. Wake Tech student Joanne Osiwe shined in the spotlight and captured the title of Wake Tech Idol Champion for 2024.
The 2024 Wake Tech Idol is Joanne Osiwe.
Osiwe defeated 10 other finalists to win the annual singing competition, highlighting student talent and receiving a $2,000 scholarship from the Wake Tech Foundation. Congratulations. Wake Tech is sharing the spirit this Thanksgiving with students in need, thanks to a holiday meal sharing program and partnership between Wake Tech, Food Lion, and Publix. Wake Tech's Care Center team and staff volunteers packed 300 meal kit bags filled with dozens of non-perishables for holiday meals, including a turkey voucher, canned vegetables, muffin mix, and ingredients for apple and pumpkin pies. Wake Tech is excited to announce that transfer student Devin Carhart has been named the college's first University Innovation Fellow by Stanford University's Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. Carhart is one of 144 college students from 44 higher education institutions in 13 countries to be selected for the 2024 cohort. She is the only community college student in this year's class. For more news, visit us online at news.waketech.edu. For now, we leave you with some of the sights and sounds from Wake Tech's vibrant International Day celebration. Did you know Wake Tech is the home to students from more than 130 different countries this semester? That's your news update.
Hello, my name is Chef Jay Beaver. Today we are going to be talking about stuffing or dressing. The two schools of thought and ways to look at this question: stuffing inside the bird is technically cooked inside the bird, dressing technically cooked outside of the bird. What do you call it, stuffing or dressing? So what I have here is a couple of recipes and sort of examples of how we will prepare a traditional Thanksgiving style stuffing. Well, the first one is going to be my mother-in-law's recipe, a little bit old school, a little traditional. She uses torn pieces of white bread. I've used a Pullman loaf, which is similar, and I've diced it because I can't help it. Dry it out on a sheet tray overnight, couple days, or in a low oven for a couple of hours to get it kind of crispy. First step. Next step, we're going to sweat onions and celery in a lot of butter. As you can see, we are talking about somewhere about a cup of butter. Cook out our vegetables here with no color to get them sweet and soft. Okay, so we're properly sweated, softened. We're gonna go ahead and bring our vegetables with all that lovely butter over to our bowl. Go ahead, toss it in. Coat. Add a little bit of parsley. Now I'm going to moisten with chicken stock. Now this is kind of a variable. How moist do you want it? Are you stuffing it inside your bird? You know, stuffing, or are you cooking it outside of the bird, which is the other way to look at, dressing. And very important, and is actually why we don't, always recommend the stuffing of birds, is that you're going to have to cook this stuffing to 165 degrees, which is going to be, way past optimal cooking time and temperature for this chicken. So you're going to have a very dried out, potentially, bird in order to properly, safely, and in a sanitary manner cook this stuffing. I'm going to come in here and go ahead and stuff that bird. I like to do a little bit of a butter baste whenever I'm roasting birds like this. And we will pop that, tie it up, truss it up, and pop it in the oven, 425, 30 minutes. So now we're going to do our dressing outside of the bird. We're going to moisten it just a touch more. And we're going to go ahead and line it into our bake-proof dish. You might use the same dish that you'll serve it in, a nice bake-proof kind of ceramic, decorative. I like to cover it first for, roughly, there's variables, maybe 400 degrees for 30 minutes covered. Uncover the last sort of 15 minutes of cooking to sort of crisp it off. Our oven. Okay, so we're ready to pull our items out of the oven. We've got our stuffing, dressing. We've got our cornbread, nice crisped up a little bit. Our grandma style sort of traditional. We can add a little bit of fresh herb garnish if we would like. Pull out a roasted bird that has been stuffed and cooked to 165 degrees. So there we have it. stuffing or dressing. Any way you do it right. It's going to be delicious. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you for listening to the We Are Wake Tech podcast. Join us next month for more insightful conversations about the programs and people of Wake Tech and how the college changes lives every day. Be sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast app to have each episode delivered right to your computer or mobile device. For more, find us at podcast.waketech.edu. To learn more about Wake Tech's exceptional educational opportunities, visit waketech.edu.